This episode of the Craftsman Online podcast is sponsored by Brix Masons. From elegant Masonic rings that showcase your commitment to our craft to finely crafted regalia and apparel that honor your tradition, BrixMasons.com delivers quality and craftsmanship that really stands out. Shop now at BrixMasons.com and use promo code CRAFTSMAN, that's CRAFTSMEN, to receive free shipping with your first order.
The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmanOnline.com.
Welcome to our countdown of the most listened to Craftsman Online podcast episodes for 2023. Hey, it's Brother Michael Arce, and our year-end tradition continues as we look back on the guests and topics from Season 4 of the Craftsman Online podcast. Here's how it works. Spreaker compiles the downloads of our episodes since January 1st, 2023, and over the next 2 weeks, you and me, we're going to be counting our way up to number 1. Now, along the way, we'll listen to conversations and discussions with our guests that you, our listener, enjoyed the most in Season 4. And after we hit the number 1 spot, join me to kick off our 5th season of the Craftsman Online podcast on Monday, January 8th. All right, let's get this countdown started.
Number 10.
We travel back to episode 11 to start this year's countdown, and that's where we find our Moon Night episode with worshipful brother Wes Latchford. When he's not serving as the district education officer of the 56th Masonic District of the Grand Lodge of Virginia, Brother Wes is our resident comic book fan. He introduced us to Stephen Grant and Mark Spector, the two personalities of one man who are plagued with blackouts and memories of the other when they transform into the Moon Knight, Marvel's superhero. On the 10th most listened to Craftsman Online podcast episode of 2023, we dive into the ancient mysteries of Egypt mythology and connections to Masonic teachings.
Time for a little Egyptology 101. But within Egyptian mythology, obviously you had the sun god Ra, the primary northern kingdom sun god, and then got adopted by the southern kingdom in the unification of, this, that, or the other thing thousands of years ago. Some things that folks may not be familiar with is there was actually 3 different entities for the sun god based on the time of day. And so Khepri was actually the sun in the morning, rising in the east, young break of the day, high noon, and, the sun at maturity was Ra. And then towards the end of the day, you ended up with Atum, who was basically the deteriorating, aging god. And then the sun would set, and then the moon would rise. And the god of the moon, who helped evening and night transitors safely from one point to another, was Khonsu. And actually, they call it Khonshu in the series, but the actual Egyptian name is Khonsu. And he was the god of moon and time. And so you've got the sun and the moon right there. Khonsu was even known as the embracer, pathfinder, the defender, and healer, because again, he was watching over what was taking place with folks, particularly traveling at night. Again, much like we had midnight lodges, because you had to travel at a moon, full moon, in order to have the illumination to get from point A to point B. Your lodge might not be at the end of the street. So the other thing that I found interesting in this parallel is that, and we know full well, as the sun rules the day and the moon governs the night, so should not only the worshipful master, but Masons in general, manage their hearts and their lives, by that normal cycle.
When you were talking about the 3 stages of the sun, if we could go back to that point, and you talked about the specific names of them, I started thinking, okay, as a Freemason, I would hear the sun and I would immediately go, okay, what officer has that role, or as that symbolizes their role? That would be the worshipful master. And I was like, okay, so then the worshipful master's job is to open and close the lodge. And perhaps we could also connect that where you have the open of the lodge, and then you have the sun at meridian, which would be the middle part of the meeting, and then closing it at the end, which I've always found interesting in our ritual when it comes to the role of the senior warden, who rises to help the master open the lodge at the beginning of the day, which makes no sense. And yet it does make sense, because when the lodge is closed, the senior warden is spending that time basically observing and learning what needs to be done when it becomes his day to move to the east and rule. So I was trying to find some of those, deeper connections that may exist there.
Mark tries to come to terms with that too, because I mean, here's somebody who's done a lot of really nasty stuff,
Right.
particularly as the Moon Knight in the name of good. But again, what's the difference between a superhero and a vigilante? They spend a lot of time in the Marvel comic universe, exploring that theme.
As we think about you're one person in public, you're one person in private, is really having that conversation, as they would say, with the man in the mirror and going, yeah, my actions of how I act this way, I can't come home and treat my family differently. This also, I would just say, as another example, I can't act one way when I'm in the safety or the confines of lodge where I'm around other men and we have all taken this obligation of keeping things inviolate in each other's breasts and we can share secret. And I can't look at that as a way to act as somebody different than I would if I was out on the street and just walking around with my non-Masonic friends. Like, I need to be the same person to both people.
A vengeance that goes within the storyline as well, because a lot of people think they're clamoring for justice when in all reality it's actually vengeance that they're seeking, and that can really cloud things. And there's several instances within the series where you see they think they're executing justice in the name of something, but what it really is either on their own or on behalf of someone else, because again, they're acting as avatars for these Egyptian gods and goddesses on Earth.
My thought was that scales, that if we were trying to pull in the connection, is less of the scales of justice as in dealing out justice to others, but the scales of equality, in my opinion, of, okay, you need a little bit of strength and you need a little bit of beauty. And of course, strength and beauty in the allegorical terms, not as in the actual, you need to be strong and pretty, like our guest, Brother Wes. I'm going to borrow a thought that a good brother of ours, Brother Angel Millar, had suggested, and that in his latest book, he talks about the concept of being kind of a well-rounded man, and that you have to be a warrior, but you also need to have that artistic side to you as well.
I think that's a key element that we sometimes tend to forget, is that, Masonry is about the whole man. It's we pat ourselves or throw, just loosely use the term, we take good men and make them better. And my question is always, how? How do we do that? And part of it, is this admonition, within all of our degrees, even in the appendant bodies, is to take and make yourself more well-rounded. Because by then doing that, you build those things that allows you then to become a better man, right? And you have a greater toolkit that honestly expands well beyond, all the tools of masonry indiscriminately, to something that is even more applicable in your daily life, both as as a husband, a father, a brother, a son, whatever particular, a boss, an employee, Pee Wee football coach. You can name the hundreds and thousands of instances where the lessons of masonry serve not only example for you, but should be an example for other people, who look and go, that's a really good guy.
Number 9.
The first step in becoming a Freemason is to ask one to be one. For Brother Luis Diaz, his journey was not that simple. I want to give you a quick update since this episode was released, My Masonic Journey. Brother Luis was recently raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason at Onion Creek Lodge number 220 in Austin, Texas. And we're working with Brother Luis for a follow-up episode next season to learn where he's looking to seek more light in the new year. In the 9th most listened to Craftsman Online podcast episode of 2023, Brother Luis details his time as a member of an irregular Masonic group and the steps he took to become an accepted Freemason.
It all started way back in my native country, Peru, and I'm originally from Chiclayo. It's a city up north. So I remember I was a little kid, and the lodge, it's close. The building of the lodge in my hometown is close to the downtown. So I was walking with my mom, and I see these guys in tuxedos going into this building. that is always closed. And for some reason, I've seen some movement at nighttime. And I was like, hey, Mom, what's going on there? I was like, oh, I don't know, but I think they're worship the devil. So don't look at them. I'm like,
El Diablo.
El Diablo. I was like, that's the party I want to go. Right? So I was going to Sunday Mass, everybody gets, nice dresses, but those guys are wearing a tuxedo. That must be cool. So that's the first thing, I saw the Square in Campus and all that. And I was like, all right, that seems cool, caught my attention, and that slipped for a while. And then through history, as I like to read about history and all that. So my favorite hero of the Peruvian history is Miguel Grau, Seminario, which actually his portrait, it's on what used to be, I don't know if it's still there, but at Queen's England's office, there's a portrait of him because he was a great mastermind of warcraft and strategic Navy captain. He was a mastermind of all that. So he was also a Mason. And then I keep digging in. Simon Bolivar, it was also a Mason. And then my favorite comedian, Cantinflas, Mario Moreno Cantinflas, Mexican, also a Mason. I'm like, all right, these guys know something that I don't know, and I want to know. There got to be something there. So, and then when I was living in California, I reached out to the Grand Lodge of California about 4 times, no answer. And then I reached out to, I saw in Spanish, Masonería, en Español. I was like, all right, someone got to answer, right? So I reached out to them, and that's why I started my journey. I got initiated there in the Scottish Rite. And then after, through life goes on, now I'm here, free and accepted in Texas now.
That's the part of the story to me that is the real grist of your journey. I get this email from Luis Diaz. The back and forth exchange that we had, it was like, well, I'm in New York. I can't really help you in Texas. I don't know brothers in Texas for you to become a Mason, but here's how you would find them, and kind of good luck, and was hoping that you would kind of find your way. But then over time, this email correspondence that we had evolved into, well, hey, dude, here's my number. Why don't you just call me sometime and we'll talk? And
yeah,
if there was anybody that I had wished was a quote unquote regular Mason, that's what was so painful in our conversations, that I knew that was something that you desired most to do. So let's talk a little bit about that experience.
The phrase that really struck the conversation and what struck all the emotions in me was the part that the first place that you become a Mason is it's at heart. So I truly believe I did. That's why when I connect with all these brothers, they're wonderful people on my old lodge. Wonderful people, wonderful brothers. They just wanted to work in Spanish. I didn't get, supercharged like thousands of dollars, to get this and that. And it actually made me work for it. For all my degrees, they make me work, not proficiency. Like it's in Texas right now, that everything is by memory, right? But they made me write a lot. You have to read a lot. Remember, as soon as I get initiated, I tried to impress my new brothers. Oh, yeah, this and that. And I used to be a musician, I like music and all that. They're like, oh, wonderful. Why don't you write about silence? I'm like, what? not music? Not noises, sounds, harmony? No? They're like, no, why don't you write about the silence, the power of silence? What silence means to you? What do you find in silence? My head exploded. As Latinos in the dramatic part, we have to grasp all that. And they're like, you want to find silence? Put yourself into a dark room, quiet down your mind, and see what silence got to say to you. I was like, that exercise right there. And your mind goes to different directions, and try to grasp that moment, what silence actually really means. And then you try to do your research about it. And philosophically and esoterically, like silence was even before nothing. That's the power of creation of silence and all that. So I was like, my head exploded, and those kind of things, they made me work for it. So in order for me to achieve my degrees until I became a master, and we did the chairs, I have to be an officer, and then I became a junior warden, senior warden, and then I got elected to be a master of my lodge. So all the things were were fine, and then I wanted to go somewhere else and visit the other brothers around the world. Yeah, we can't do that.
That's when you found out. Yeah.
And that's what okay.
What words would you have for a man who's listening that would be in a similar situation that you were a few years ago, that was contemplating wanting to become a regular or accepted in Freemason?
Follow your heart. Deep inside, you know what is right. You know what you want to do. And just have the courage to follow it. Because the reality is, this is your journey. And you have to make the most out of it. So if you got to go where you got to go, you have to work on what you have to work. And that's up to you. And that journey it's not to the outside, it's to the inside. What else do you need to be a better person? Because if the first place that you were born a Mason is your heart, what else do you need to feed that passion?
Hey, it's Brother Michael Arce for Bricks Masons. The Craftsman Online podcast is now sponsored by Bricks Masons. BricksMasons.com is my only destination for Masonic shopping needs, whether it's apparel for myself or a really cool gift idea for a brother. Make BricksMasons.com your online marketplace where tradition meets innovation. Well, this is pretty much a must-have for every traveling man. A stainless steel, sleek Blue Lodge Masonic flask. Yes, and these come in all sizes, from 1 to 10 ounces, starting under $18. And I love the fact that their leak-proof design helps you prevent spilling, and you can also choose from multiple Masonic logos. Did I mention you can also personalize your flask with free text engraving? Get your 1 to 18 ounce flask now at BricksMasons.com. Visit BricksMasons.com and explore their extensive catalog and elevate your Masonic experience with style and substance. Plus, our Craftsman Online podcast listeners, make sure to use promo code CRAFTSMAN, that's CRAFTSMEN, at checkout to enjoy free shipping with your first order at BricksMasons.com. The 8th most listened to Craftsman Online podcast episode for 2023 is actually a first for our production team, a guided Masonic meditation. In episode 7 this season, we traveled to an 18th century Egyptian Rite Lodge through the talents of Brother Angel Millar. Now, not only did Brother Angel write this entire episode, he also serves as our guide, safely guiding the listener from your physical space through a transformative journey to London, England during the turn of the 18th century. As I noted in the original episode, this performance is intended to be listened to in a safe and quiet environment. I can tell you firsthand, when I played this episode with the brethren of my lodge, we laid out yoga mats on the lodge room floor that was really only illuminated by candlelight. And yes, I did hear some snores. So with that in mind, we're going to take a peek inside Brother Millar's guided journey to an 18th century Egyptian Rite Lodge.
And in a few seconds, you will arrive at your destination. You will arrive at your destination. On the countdown of 3, 3, 2, 1. You pull up outside a tavern. You can already hear the noise of the crowd inside, drinking and laughing and talking. All of the chatter, just a noise, barely indistinguishable, but you can already perhaps make out 1 or 2 words: Lodge, Master Mason. You open the door and climb down out of the carriage and walk towards the door where you see a man nodding. He ushers you inside. And inside you can see a room full of people drinking and talking and laughing. and the man at the door gestures towards some stairs away from the crowd that will lead you one floor up. And you put one foot on the first step and then take another step and begin to climb the stairs. You can put your hand on the banister to steady yourself. Perhaps you look back at the crowd below as you climb the stairs. One floor up. You continue to climb, climbing those stairs. And on the count of 3, you will have reached the top. 3, 2, 1. And before you now stretches a long hallway with several doors either side of the hall. And you can hear the clinking of glasses coming from one of the rooms, and some chatter, as if there is a small crowd of people talking and having a good time. Outside the door is a slender, middle-aged man, splendidly attired in a long embroidered yellow coat with blue breeches. And he is sitting, and the sword is resting on his lap. As you approach, as you walk along the hall towards him, he grows nearer to you. The gentleman stands, takes his sword in his left hand and extends his right towards you. Gripping your hand firmly, you can feel his hand a little soft and a little clammy. And he ushers you into the room next to him. And as you enter, you are immediately struck by several long hangings of cloth banners on the walls, each with a different Masonic emblem. A sun on one, a hammer and chisel on another, a square and compasses on a third. And inside the room, ladies and gentlemen are standing and talking, conversing with each other, and you notice immediately that they are all wearing aprons with rounded corners, embroidered with a square and compasses. And as you look around, you begin to make out words that they are saying: Kabbalah, Rosy Cross, Egypt. In the middle of the room is a large table. On it are 3 candlesticks and a large bowl of punch. A group of men are sitting there smoking long, thin pipes. One of them refers to another as Master Cagliostro. Before you get a chance to speak to the gentleman, however, a man approaches you from behind, touches you on your arm, and leads you to a door which leads to a small room and ushers you inside. Inside the room there is only a chair and a table, upon which there is a candle and a painting or tracing board, and some other objects. As he closes the door, you sit in near darkness, taking a seat at the table, and ponder the painting. You recognize that it is a Masonic tracing board, but you do not recognize the symbols on it. The painting depicts an elderly man representing time, and he stands before a pyramid. On the painting, to the left of the pyramid, is a horn of plenty, winding like a ram's horn, with fruit spilling out of it. To the right is depicted some chains and architectural tools, a square, a compasses, a ruler, and so on. As you sit now and contemplate the tracing board and its symbols, you can hear the sounds of people making announcements, although you do not make out what they are saying, and you can hear the sound of loud knocking, knock, 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 then that repeated 3 times more. You try not to pay too much attention to the sounds. Instead, you just focus on the tracing board with its pyramid, an elderly man representing time, the horn of plenty, and the architectural tools.
For more than 200 years, the world has been captivated by the most controversial secret society. Not the Freemasons. The Illuminati. Or are they the Freemasons? That has always been a debate between brothers. Brother Joe Wages is the co-author of The Secret School of Wisdom, The Authentic Rituals and Doctrines of the Illuminati, and co-star of the documentary Illuminated, The True Story of the Illuminati on Apple TV. In the 7th most listened to Craftsman Online podcast episode for 2023, The Secret School of Wisdom, Brother Joe shares the intriguing truth, origin of ritual, and degree ceremonies of the Bavarian Illuminati during the turn of the 18th century, and how that group continues to influence our craft today.
If we were to travel back in time, would we be able to identify the differences between Freemasonry and the Illuminati, or would that even not be a clear distinction yet?
That's one of the Easter eggs, like in the Illuminated movie, is if you watch the rituals that are in it, you're getting a window in the past of what did Freemasonry look like in the English-speaking world prior to the ancients coming in and changing things a bit.
It's interesting to see that the Illuminati is basically almost a byproduct of that very famous war that happened in Freemasonry, which still influences our ritual today. You and I were talking before we started rolling the tape here that, you know, if you travel back in time, you probably aren't going to have the same experiences Brother George Washington did when he went through his degrees.
That's right. And the thing is, too, if you look at his lodge in Fredericksburg, they're chartered 58 from the Grand Lodge of Scotland, something like this. And so that's like a Scottish form of Freemasonry, but is it a modern form of Freemasonry? We don't know, because you can't gain the context in the minutes. I've really tried to divine this. Like if you're looking to find out an old lodge, are they working in ancients or moderns form? Like, look for the position of the wardens. If you've got both wardens in the West, you're dealing with a moderns text. If you've got, in the normal configuration we're used to, it's an ancients ritual. And so that's one of those little handy little clues when you're reading minutes on how to figure it out.
Gotcha. So in very plain spoken terms, basically the Illuminati were like other brothers throughout time in the history of Freemasonry that just wanted more light, so they started their own degree system. And
no, I think what it was is they were trying to capture. So, like, let's look at it from a power perspective, right? Like, if you have a system that's the dominant right of Freemasonry, they're spread all throughout Germany, the eastern part of France, northern part of Italy, right? So basically, core Western Europe is the influence of this group. The founder dies, and then so we know by 1780, just a few years later, Knigge's trying to revise it. There's other people trying to revise it as well. And so what's happening is this core group is fractured, and people are trying to pick up the pieces. So you've got the CBCS on one hand, the Illuminati on the other, and then the Golden Rosy Cross, all trying to take bites out of the same pie. And
so it's a power grab, basically.
Yes, that's what we're dealing with here. It's like, so the Illuminati, when they go back to the original Zoroastrian ritual, they're going back to the rituals that people might remember before the strict observance. The strict observance ritual doesn't really get codified until 1764, and they're not out, conquering for their system until really about 1766. So from 66 to 82, they're the dominant system, right? But there's people still that are Masons that remember Freemasonry before that. That's another reason why they picked that Zoroastrian ritual, is because anyone that might have a memory of what Masonry was before the strict observance, they're like, oh, we went back to it. Thank you. And so that was another little element, because if you tried to take that same ritual that Villamos was doing, you're like, this is, I don't know, like when you get Windows XP, this is like Windows 98. Okay.
Well, that was one of the things during the movie that I found so interesting, where it seemed like the Illuminati had infiltrated Freemasonry because they were bringing Freemasons over to the Illuminati. But now that you explain it, like Freemasons almost were seeking the Illuminati because they wanted to go back to, as you mentioned, what was familiar to them, what was known. They didn't want to be a part of this other thing.
Well, right. And that's what it was. It was like trying to get people to fit in where they felt most comfortable, right? So on the one hand, it's propaganda, right? Because again, remember, the Illuminati's goal isn't so much to be a Freemasonic system. Their goal is to capture a system, right? So you've got a loose chess piece in play. Three parties are all trying to take bites out of the same pie. They want to get as many pieces as they can for themselves because their goal isn't masonry. Their goal is members and money and power and influence, right?
Right.
That's the goal.
Right. Well, that's where it started to connect with me, because I thought of, in Blue Lodge, where you'll have a system where a lodge is lacking members or lacking money, and then other brothers come in and they take over that lodge either, by force, or they just infiltrate and their numbers are greater and they can, vote things and make it happen. And that's where the downfall of the Illuminati starts to take place. Is they really only had like a 4-year run, and then they were done?
Really from 76 until roughly 1788. And it's like this. So like you've got like two competing visions. Weishaupt is like, he's looking at it like he wants to make a secret academy. He's a college professor. He wants to teach people the Enlightenment that he was deprived of in Bavaria because, they had a lot of influence from the Catholic Church as far as like the educational system. The Jesuits had a monopoly on education in Bavaria. So like the whole reason for even creating this system is the suppression of the Enlightenment itself, right? Weishaupt's motivation is secret academy. We're going to teach the virtues of the Enlightenment to everybody. Knigge, on the other hand, he wants to have like a Masonic high degree system because he's a high ranking member of the one that just collapsed. And so like these two competing visions go head to head. Knigge at the very end just says, forget it. I'm through with this. What the Illuminati did though, like, because we were talking about like, how do they get all the Freemasons? They made this thing called the Eclectic Rite. And what results is they jettison two of these like Far Eastern lodges that are under the influence of this guy named Joachim Christoph von Bode. And Bode is the guy who succeeds Weishaupt. And they kind of cut him off at the knees. And so he makes this silly little Masonic reform where it's like, okay, we've got 3 degrees, no high degrees, but he puts in Illuminati low degrees. And it's another book that I'm doing because he's the same guy that goes to Paris in 1787 to try to export the Illuminati in French over there. It ends up not working out though. Like he translates the rituals, everything's ready to go. And then 2 months later, after he's got the French fair copies, the whole order collapses. And it's like he was just that close.
This is by that much. What I also found interesting was the 3-degree structure, very similar in the Illuminati to what we do in Blue Lodge. Mm-hmm. You've given these presentations to
billions of times, yeah.
I'm sure you've given it to audiences that are, we would call the profane and Freemasonry, but just the general public. What questions have they asked you that were surprising?
Well, they'll always hit the same thing. They're like, well, is it true that the Illuminati came to America, this, that, and the other? And those kinds of like questions, like they're interesting because like what they're doing is they're playing off the liturgy. So remember when I said before, you have to read everything, even like the conspiratorial like trite, like you have to read it and you have to, and it's kind of like, when I was in college, like I was taking a history class and there was like this one teacher and he made us read these different things, like these different accounts of the Holocaust. And some of them were like the pro-Nazi angle where it was like there was no Hitler order, there was no this, that, and the other. And then there was the other ones that were like, of course he gave the order, just because we don't have any evidence doesn't mean it was destroyed. And so what he was teaching us was like, you take the two extremes, right? And somewhere in the middle is going to be the truth of the information here. And so people are like, well, what is history? Well, history, like, to a lot of people is like a count of perspectives, right? So sometimes you get biased. People filter out only the things that they want. Same thing with your research. You need to be well-rounded and you need to read everything, even the most abhorrent, disgusting things or the most ridiculous, stupid things. You still have to read it because you have to understand what is the full spectrum of the information that I'm dealing with, right? And it's not to check you per se like that, but it's to know what are the boundaries and to have you'll still get hit with like weird questions and stuff, but it's not much is going to catch you flat-footed.
We're at the final spot for the first half of our countdown, and we land on Hiram Abiff, the man, the myth, and the legend, with Brother David DeHaasen. As a central figure of the Master Mason degree, Hiram Abiff is the most controversial and esoteric character in Freemasonry. Many scholars and researchers have sought to discover his roots in relation to the ancient mysteries of Freemasonry. And honestly, what fascinated me most about Brother David's research into the origins of Hiram Abiff was his analysis of Hiram's name as proof that throughout many points throughout time, our ancient operative Grand Master in Freemasonry literally left his mark.
I kind of equate him to like St. Patrick, where, St. Patrick is, he was this real person, and so much has been written about him and things attributed to him. And I was kind of thinking maybe Hiram Abiff was, kind of like St. Patrick, and being maybe this kind of composite figure of many people kind of wrapped up into this single individual. Maybe that's true. I'd like to think that he was a real person. Reading what you see in the Bible, in Kings and Chronicles, that it's written with such specificity. The references to him are so rich in detail that you can't help but think that, hey, there's got to be some truth to this.
There's a special superpower that is Brother DeHaasen's background. So what is it that you do that adds this extra layer of research?
Both professionally and academically, I had a background just studying Arabic and Hebrew, and just kind of looked at some of the linkages between this family of languages, the Afro-Asiatic languages, what used to be called the Semitic languages, and just the cultural threads that pervade all of them, the commonalities across all of these languages. I mean, I'm talking like, ancient Canaanite or Phoenician, Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, Amharic.
And that's what caught my ear is when you said, well, Hiram actually comes from Hiram, which is based in this. And then I'm like, okay, no one's ever gone there before. Because I think most learned or just exploring Freemasons, we've gone through the volume of Sacred Law, or we've searched for Hiram Abiff. And yeah, there's a sprinkling of references about Hiram in the Bible. And if that's really all you walk away from, you're like, okay, Hiram was a pretty good guy. Where did you go in your research that took those meanings way deeper?
Like one of the interesting things I thought was the one verse in 2 Chronicles, chapter 2, verses 11 through 14, Solomon talking about him, he refers to him as Hiram, my father. He says, Hiram Avi, Hiram, really my father or my master. So that reference, just using that Eb or Ev for father, master for this commoner is very revealing. And then the name of Hiram and the way he's referenced. So it's either Hiram or Huram Avi or Hiram Aviv, which is his father. So it's that Hiram Aviv, which becomes Hiram Abiff, kind of later on in English and in other languages. That reference right there says, here's a king referring to a commoner as a master, my father, this authority figure, the quality of his craftsmanship, his expertise, his excellence, his commitment to excellence. Like, I think for Freemasons, he's a model, outside of the Hiramic legend. It's like, here we have something, we can not, it's not about status or wealth, but, for me, it's like reaching our full potential as men, as individuals, as Freemasons. Like, he's a model there, when he has a king referring to him as a master, as a father figure, really. And that's, really when it comes to Ab, how we can kind of look at that in a translated form. But later on in 2 Chronicles, in chapter 2, it's noted that he is skillful in work in gold and silver and brass and iron. This is still the Iron Age. This is 10th century BC. Working with iron is still a new technology. And here's this craftsman working in brass. Everyone in the Middle East is working in brass at this point. And here he's working with this metal the industry involved with that, with ironworking, smelting, everything. He's also skilled in working with purple dye, blue dye, the dye of kings. So, and these are the Phoenicians, Tyre and Sidon. This is Phoenicia, the Canaanite people of the Eastern Mediterranean. So he's entrusted to work with these dyes. There's laws that prohibit commoners from wearing these materials. So that itself, it's like, wow, there's something really special about this guy. He's not just your average Joe, not just some guy, voluntold to work for the king. There's something, and Solomon and King Hiram of Tyre recognizes that there's something special about him. It's interesting because like his name itself changes within First Kings at least 3 times. We see his name as Hiram, Huram, and then Hirom, and then it's rendered as Huram in Second Chronicles. The same bouncing around, if you will, of spellings applies to King Hiram of Tyre as well. His name is spelled multiple ways, sometimes within the same verse. It's really interesting. We see the root system within Afro-Asiatic languages kind of play out. Here we can break down his name to 3 letters, really. Cha, Ra, Ma. So the Cha, Rosh, Mim. And this is fairly universal across Afro-Asiatic languages, but those roots, that 3-letter root really tends to mean highborn, exalted, sanctified. In addition to all those references about him, those, as a master, as a father being put on that pedestal, his name itself, and of course he shares it with the king of Tyre, and sometimes that has caused confusion. Hey, are these the same individuals? I see like the biblical references and the Masonic references really kind of capturing the whole person. Like you really kind of almost need both to know a little bit about possibly this person who lived in real life, and then all of the legends that have arisen around him. I do find it interesting that a number of years ago in Lebanon, the ancient city of Byblos, I believe it's Jubail today, I think they found a sarcophagus that is believed to be tied to King Hiram. And my suspicion is that there's no inscriptions, there's no archaeological evidence for this individual. I wouldn't be surprised if someday, someone is excavating a site and comes across something that refers to this individual. I mean, that's my suspicion, maybe my hope.
Well, that's going to do things. We're about halfway through the countdown of the top 10 most listened to Craftsman Online podcast episodes from 2023. If you're interested in hearing the full episodes with our guests, look for the links in the show notes and come back next week as we continue our countdown to the most listened to Craftsman Online podcast of 2023. If you have a few seconds, a review, maybe you could throw us some stars, or click on the follow or subscribe button in your podcast player. Those actions really mean a lot. And I want to thank you in advance for your support throughout the year, because what you do helps connect the Craftsman Online podcast with people who have an interest in Freemasonry, or just brothers seeking additional light in our ancient and gentle craft. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.